Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. In this episode, I have Liz Warner. She is about to turn 30 years old in about a month, and she wanted to run 30 marathons and help out 20 different nonprofits in their goals and do it all over the planet. So she looked at a map and said, where do I want to go? And where would it be fun to run a marathon? She went to places like Somalia, to places like Yemen, places quite off the beaten track. I talked to her about that mission and talked about her last 2 or 3 marathons that she has to go. So enjoy this episode, and her final marathon will be to Mount Everest. This show was sponsored by all my patrons at patreon.com/ftapon. And I want to give a special shout out to one of my patrons, Kathy Edgar Kennedy, and Health Access Sumbawa, which she supports. Now, enjoy the show. First of all, you're going to be 30 years old in June of 2020.
Correct.
And your goal is to run 30 marathons before you turn 30.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. But first, I want to know, of the 26 marathons that you've already run so far,
yes,
which one really sucked balls?
I did a marathon in November in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. And this race was just controversial in general because, I had been in the country for a week and a half before the race. And 2 days before the actual marathon, I went to go pick up my bib, and they told me that they were not allowing women to participate in that year's marathon. 2 days later. So,
why?
Yeah, it was a crazy situation, and there was a few other women who were also signed up with me. I mean, it wasn't a massive marathon, but still. And we sort of, laid down some law and fought with the organizers for a few days. Finally, they let us run the marathon. But this marathon as well, it was like maybe 95 degrees. It was really hot. And unbeknownst to us, there was a 4-hour cutoff point. So, which is fine. Normally I try to aim to run around the 4-hour mark, but with 90-degree weather, it just was really tough. So maybe for the last 2 hours of the race, or hour and a half, they had closed the course and there was just traffic coming in all directions, and I was determined to finish. So it was just dodging cars the last half of the marathon, which was not very fun, but it was definitely an experience.
Did they have a lot of resupply stations, in other words, water along the way, or was it very sparse?
Yes, for the first half, yes, but then when they cleared the course, no. So luckily there were a lot of restaurants along the way. So I was with a small group. I was running with a few other people. So we just stopped and bought bottles of water. But I was not the best, the most organized race, I should say.
Well, vous parlez français, donc c'était facile de parler avec les Ivoiriens, for those who didn't understand that. Yeah, but
no, that made it so much French. Easier.
Right. So because you've lived in Paris?
Yes.
For how long? For the past
3 years now.
Okay. Yeah. So you went to a bilingual school in Atlanta.
Yes, correct. There are a lot of
Why did you go to a bilingual school?
Yeah, there are a lot of international companies based here in Atlanta, I think for tax reasons. And so in the mid-90s, there's someone who I think there were a bunch of parents who sort of lobbied to have an international school here in Atlanta. And I mean, I think when I started there were only maybe a few hundred kids, and now it's just exploded because I think most families want their kids to learn a lot of languages now, but back then, 15, 20 years ago, it was not the case. So yeah. But
where are your parents from originally?
Both my parents are from New York, but my dad, he actually went to medical school in France. So he always had an affinity towards French culture, and it was his life goal to have me, my brother, and my sister to learn French. So that's sort of how, that all came to be.
Let's talk about your personal records as far as your fastest marathons. Which was the fastest? And maybe it was the Abidjan one the slowest?
So my fastest race was actually the first race of this challenge, which was last January in Muscat, Oman. and I ran a marathon at 3 hours, 42 minutes. And then my slowest marathon time was actually, because a few of these marathons are what's called like trail or mountain marathons. So you literally run up a mountain or a few mountains. So I did a race in Colombia in December, and that took me 8.5 hours just because it was one of these really intense mountain marathons.
Was it also really hot, or was it relatively cool in the mountains?
I think most people would say it was very hot. Like, it was definitely in the 80s, but because I've run a few races in the 90s or even close to 100-degree Fahrenheit, it was like bearable for me, I should say.
Right. I mean, you grew up in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Atlanta,
true.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like growing up in Côte d'Ivoire,
Yes, yes.
Your best time was about 3 hours, 40 minutes
yes,
in Oman?
Exactly.
Now, by the way, one thing that I should have made clear right from the beginning, but part of your objective is not just to run 30 marathons, because there's, I think one guy, I forgot his name. He's from San Francisco. I should know him. And he did 50 marathons in 50 days in different state, I think, have you heard about this guy?
I haven't. I mean, there's so many amazing people doing such cool things these days, but I mean, yeah.
So, but what distinguishes yours is that you're picking places in different continents. Your 30 marathons are not all happening in America. You just happen to be in Atlanta right now as we're talking, because this weekend you're going to run. But tell me about your selection process, because you had to pick 30 marathons.
Yes.
And you want to pick them all over the world.
Yes.
How did you decide to pick?
Yeah. So when I was first planning this project, I should also say that when I started this project, I'd already run 10 marathons. And so this challenge is really the final 20. So I think I got overly excited, and in many ways, Run to Reach felt like this sort of once-in-a-lifetime personal sabbatical I felt so lucky to embark on. So at first, I chose a lot of countries that I just personally really wanted to travel to, like Argentina and Cuba and the Seychelles even. But and then 6 months into the challenge, around last June, I realized just how much more interesting the whole project would be, mostly from a development perspective, if I chose to adventure to more far-reaching places that are seldom traveled to, like Afghanistan or Côte d'Ivoire, or even last week I was in Somaliland, which is technically part of Somalia. So that's really been the focus, is to try to go to more peculiar places, I should say.
I want to take a step back and go back to that Côte d'Ivoire marathon. I never did get the reason why they were saying women couldn't run.
I mean, I think it was just pure sexism. And they kept, they even at one point said that, oh yes, we allowed women to run last year and most of them couldn't finish. And, okay. I challenged that by saying,
you said it was last second that you found out there was a 4-hour cutoff.
Correct. I found this out during the marathon.
You're joking.
Yeah, I was, at the halfway point, and it was really all over the place. And I mean, I was at the, 13-mile point, and they told me, they're like, yeah, you're not going to be able to finish the race in time. We're going to have to clear the road. And again, I had to argue with them, like, we will finish, like, no matter what. I don't care. Like, I have the route on my phone. But just you need to allow us to at least finish. So, and especially with this project, like, if I'm not allowed to finish a marathon, it's a big deal for me, because I have to figure out another race to do. And, especially going to Côte d'Ivoire, because yes, the marathon component is a huge part of the project, but it's also, working with all the NGOs in each of these countries. And so it's a big deal when I'm not able to actually run the race.
What percentage of the people were not able to finish in 4 hours? I mean, in other words, did you see a ton of other people's trust? Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
It seems like that should be like a key thing to say up front. But obviously, this is a test. I've been to all African countries, and this doesn't surprise me, because organization is often not a strength in Africa.
Yes.
And just it just doesn't surprise me how this whole thing went down. But but let's talk about another African marathon, which was Somaliland.
Yes.
There you had to run and you had to be covered, I imagine, because it's a somewhat serious, but fairly serious Muslim country. In other words, at least superficially so. They want to cover up the women.
Yes.
You're not going to run around in shorts and tank top.
No.
So, and Somaliland can be hot. I guess, were you there running in the winter?
I was there just several days ago. It was in the high 80s during the marathon. So it was hot and the sun was strong, I should say.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but then, of course, you felt the heat much more because you're covered from head to toe.
Correct.
Right. And you're also wearing a hijab, something to cover your head, your hair.
Yep.
So you're really feeling the heat much more so than, let's say, you might have felt it even in Abidjan for that matter, because it was probably humid in Abidjan.
Yes. No, it made it really tough. I think towards the end of it, I honestly felt like I was going to pass out. But I felt I think you have to make the distinction between what is, culturally appropriate and, covering my head there. It was more just respecting the religion. It really is predominantly Muslim in Somaliland, and I had no problem at all doing that. And I think I would have just attracted so much more unwanted attention if I hadn't done that.
One of the things you say in your website.
Yes.
Go ahead, give your website name. Run to Reach.
Oh, yes, runtoreach.com.
One of the things you say there is that running is a right, that we should have it as a right. And now, in some ways, that's obvious. Anybody can run. Any Homo sapien can run. But as you discovered in Côte d'Ivoire, you may not be able to, you may not have a right to run in a marathon.
Absolutely.
So my question is, what did you feel when all of a sudden they said, okay, but you don't have a right to wear what you want to wear, in the case of Somaliland? Did you feel frustrated?
No, because again, I think, when you have to compare it to running as a right, again, it's respecting their religion. And especially in Somaliland, I think in some countries, for example, in Egypt, you would see some Muslim women not wearing a hijab, and that's her own personal choice. But there, it's really, expected, and that's more coming from religion. When women are not allowed to run in these cultures or in these, countries, that's more of a cultural restriction. And so I really see it as a distinction between religious and cultural restriction. And that's why I choose to respect, sort of what they would see as a religious restriction. In Somaliland, it's still not at all accepted or acceptable for women to run freely. But I think this is changing, and, but I think certain parts of the culture, like covering up, that will never change, because that, again, goes back to more of a religious restriction that I just choose to respect, because I think that's sort of a non-negotiable aspect of being there.
Right. Although I wouldn't say it will never change. It's possible it will change.
Yeah, it's possible. But I think even I love actually speaking to the topic of women covering up in Muslim countries with the women there. And, I was talking with a few women in Hargeisa in Somaliland, and they were like, if we chose not to cover up, everyone would stare at us, and we prefer to actually remain anonymous when we're in the streets or in the market. And so I think everyone also has their own reason. It's not purely because they're forced to as well.
Right. Now, have marathons gotten easier as you've gone along, or has it gotten harder for you?
I think my tolerance to run 26 miles is, it's quite high, and I don't really ever get nervous before a race any longer. I know that no matter what, hopefully if I don't trip along the way, that I can finish. But I wouldn't say I've gotten any faster or I think actually I think my marathon time has gotten slower as I've been running more marathons, just because I'm so scared of getting injured during this process, because I'm literally running sometimes marathons, every week or every other week. So I just need to make sure that my body stays in one piece. But I think, in terms of, I really just don't get too nervous sort of the day before. It's kind of like, it feels like any other day now, just running for 4 or 5 hours.
So you did 10 marathons before you embarked on this project. How
Correct.
old were you when you did your first marathon?
I was 23, so it was in 2013 when I did my first marathon. I was living in Japan, and I was actually... my father had just passed away, so it was sort of this coping mechanism, signing up for this race, and really like this really healthy outlet for me trying to process everything that had happened. And from that point, after I crossed the finish line, I totally became addicted to running. Not even from like a competitive standpoint. I just loved how therapeutic it had become for me, and it really became sort of my form of meditation in a lot of ways.
Got it. And why did you decide to raise money for this whole thing, as opposed to just doing this on your own? Or, you could still do publicity and have your Instagram and do things like that, but it's a big fucking deal to all of a sudden, like, now I've got to actually raise money, and it puts a whole level of complexity. And a lot of people, I think, underestimate that. They think, I'll just create a GoFundMe page and that's it. And you're like, no, dude, it like becomes a lot harder. So tell us about your thought process there, and what did you learn along the way? I
think, when I ran the first 10 marathons, obviously my love for running in all these different countries has contributed so much to my journey of personal development and self-discovery. And I think there was always this tingling feeling I felt in my gut, how could I in return give back to these countries, equal to their effect on me, or like to the extent that they've given back to me. And if I had just done this without, the marathon part of it is sort of the really fun part. And to me, that feels like 5% of the project, actually. What's given so much meaning to what I've been doing is, personally selecting all of the NGOs I'm working with, connecting with them, going to the countries, meeting with these people, trying to find like the best and most effective way that I can showcase their work. And I think that is what has been the most transformative aspect of this whole project, is just meeting all of these really inspiring people who are doing such incredible things in each of these countries. In terms of fundraising, it is so hard because I'm also, I'm working with 20 different organizations during this whole process. And they're all doing very different things, even though the general theme amongst all is that they're, empowering women. They're all women focused, but it's definitely made it, I think, harder because the messaging is always very different. And when I am fundraising, I'm sort of fundraising for all of them instead of just, individually. So it's made it very complicated, but I think also in the same way, incredibly interesting because, I learned so much about each of the countries just even from working with each of the NGOs.
Right. And your process of fundraising, you can have people either go to your website and donate to the charity there, or but you also have a way that people, if they want to support you personally and not just the charity, then they can also do that through your GoFundMe page. Correct.
And, at this point too, I'm close to finishing up this whole mission. And originally when I started this project, my goal is to raise 100,000, which is a big goal. And I think no matter what, I wanted to aim high. And at this point, I've raised close to 28,000. And so I still, thank you so much. It still feels like a long ways away from 100,000.
I know why. I know why it's so hard to raise that much money, because I did a Kickstarter campaign and I raised $23,000, and that was so fucking hard to do 23,000, and here you are doing 28,000. The funny thing is, of course, it's all about setting expectations. I set a goal of, I think, 20,000, and I raised 23. And so I felt like success, but you raised more than me. But because you set a goal of 100,000, you might feel like, God, I felt short.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is ridiculous because 28,000 is a ton of money.
Oh, thank you so much.
And it's so, but I imagine also, Liz, sometimes it's hard to keep track of exactly who donated because not everybody's going to go through your website and kind of give you credit for that donation, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. And I think, again, what's so hard is that, I do have a support page on my website, but because I am sort of raising money for all of these charities and sort of the idea is to disperse the final amount equally amongst all of them, and some donors have been like, I've been really inspired by this one organization you've worked with. I want my money to go there. And so I've made note of all of this. But I think, what's been really hard is that I am raising for so many different organizations.
I see. So I didn't understand that part of it. Is that, in other words, you take all the money in a pot and then you're going to distribute it equally among 20 different charities? Yeah,
this is the general idea. I mean, to be honest too, it's to be expected. I think I've had very, very close partnerships with several of the NGOs, and that also comes down to, me being in the country longer, them being able to sort of support me in ways that it's just made our collaboration easier. And so, I feel like I probably, because I feel so connected to these organizations, I might try to give them, probably more of the money. But I haven't totally decided the process at the end. But the idea is, yes, that no matter what, I am giving, a big chunk of the final amount to each of them.
Right. Okay. And then why did you decide 20 organizations as opposed to 30 organizations? You probably got that question.
It's because I started Run to Reach when I had already run 10 marathons. So this mission, the project, is the final 20 marathons. And so that's why I chose 20 organizations. I mean, I hope to go back to the original 10 and obviously keep, I love doing this kind of work. And I don't think that my reach will end, just with these 20 countries. But it just so happens that it's just, this project is really the focus on the final 20 countries.
Right. Now, what surprised you along the way, Liz, in this whole process?
I think when I initially started planning this project, it was a dream. Like, I was giving myself this year to plan this, expedition around the world almost. And I didn't realize how difficult it would be to just even plan all the trips, coordinate with all the NGOs. Just the administrative side of the project has been really exhausting. And then of course the fundraising aspect is just, I'm a kind of a timid person. And so at a certain point, like sometimes it feels a little awkward to keep asking people for money, especially, I can only ask so much, it feels, and I've been asking now for over a year. So I think just that whole aspect of the project, I didn't foresee it being as challenging as it is. And, of course, also trying to remain financially afloat during this whole mission too. I also naively assumed that, hey, it was going to be very easy to get a sponsor or a big sponsor to sort of help me with all of the travel costs. But that has been really hard and also very time consuming because I'm constantly sending cold emails. But I still wouldn't trade the experience for anything. And again, it's just been a huge learning process. And I honestly hope that I come across someone in the future who's not doing something totally similar to me, but I hope to be able to help them along the way and give them sort of guidance that I don't think I actually had with this project.
Speaking about that guidance, what would you have done differently if you had to do it all over again? So if somebody came up to you and listening to this podcast right now and says, okay, Liz, I would like to do something similar to you, but what would you tell them? You would say, don't do it, you fucking idiot.
I know. I mean, honestly, there were points last year where I was like, what did I get myself
Sign
into?
up for?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just read your thing and I was like, dude, that is like fucking hard. This is really difficult. 30 marathons is a piece of cake compared to all the other shit that you got to do.
Exactly. And I think that's what people, if you look at my Instagram, it's sort of like, look at this girl traveling everywhere and she's running everywhere. It's like, that's maybe like 0.001% of what actually goes on, honestly. And,
right.
I think I would.
Are you saying that Instagram is not like reality?
Oh, I don't want to reveal
Let's
too
not
much.
tell the whole world that.
I know, exactly. Oh, sigh. But I would, I think
I've always gone to, if ever I want to get a grasp of reality, I go to Instagram.
Oh my God, I know. Sometimes I just need to, honestly, I tell myself, if I didn't have this project, I would just need to click off because it is a crazy world on there. But yeah, I think if anyone did come along and they were deciding to take on a crazy thing like this, involving sports or something, just a personal project, I think what's also been difficult with Run to Reach is I had 2 months to plan everything. And in retrospect, I wish I had 2 years to plan everything. Because I think there's been a lot of kinks along the way. And just even in terms of sort of securing funding, it would have made the whole process a lot easier. But I would tell the person, go for it. Because even if you fail, no matter what, isn't our end goal in life to have, to live a life full of stories? And, I think what's also been hard with this project is telling certain people what I'm doing and feeling like they're not taking me seriously, or, feeling like I'm going against the grain and I'm doing something that most people just would never consider doing. But I think that's what makes us interesting people, and you have to take risks. And, I think the amount of amazing people I've met on this journey, that's reward enough for the whole experience. And I feel so grateful for that.
But it seems also that you might advise a person who wants to not duplicate what you did, but do something similar, to say, okay, bite off less than you think you can chew. In other words, just tone down your expectations, because it's going to be a lot more work than you can imagine. I think that's what you would say.
Yes, completely. And
right. So if somebody said to you, hey, Liz, I want to do 50 marathons in 50 countries, you would say, well, okay, fine, go for it, but maybe don't try to raise money for 40 charities at the same time.
Exactly. I think
one or the
no, 100%.
Or just do one charity or something.
Or just do one charity. Yeah. But I think at the same time, I think I would tell that person to push themselves, not necessarily aim low, because still doing 50 marathons in 50 countries is amazing. But I think, again, it's been really hard working with all these charities, or just sort of the logistics of coordinating with all of them. But it's made the experience so rich. And so I think anyone would be even surprised how much they could push themselves to really exceed, certain expectations. And I would just say, go for it. Even if you fail, it's a better story afterwards,
Speaking about stories, tell me about the story about Oman. Why did you run that one so fast?
I honestly think, well, it was a pretty flat race. And I think it was because it was the first marathon of this mission. And I also had been training quite a bit beforehand, in the lead up of this, these 20 marathons. And so I think I was in really good shape, and I was just fired up. And I don't know. I was not, I also don't wear a watch to time me. So I don't know what was in my system. I felt really good that day and just completely gave it my all. But I think since then, I'm more careful about not pushing my body too much because, again, I just don't want to get injured. So my times now are considerably slower.
Now, why is it that you don't wear a watch? I don't know of any marathoner. I mean, maybe a lot of the people do, but it seems like every marathoner wears a watch.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the fact that running is meditative for me. And I think, I tried wearing a watch for a period of time and it just stressed me out. And I think running is a few hours of the day where I want to sign off and be present with my thoughts and be present with how my body's feeling. And personally, just wearing a watch for me just takes that sort of level of balance and stillness in my head away. So I feel like I'm less of a runner because of that, because I'm just not as competitive. But I also, because I feel so in tune with my body, I honestly can tell you what pace I'm going at any point, and I can tell you how fast I'm going to run any marathon. So yeah, that's sort of the reason why I don't wear a watch.
Okay, interesting. And what about your next 3? So you're doing we're right now recording this at the very last day of February, and you're going to be running in tomorrow, is it? You're going to run the Atlanta Marathon?
On Sunday. So day after tomorrow.
Okay. So in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then what are the next, that will be your 27th marathon. And so then what are the 28, 29, and 30th marathons?
Yes. So the week after next, I'm doing a marathon.
I hope the 30th one is is the 30th one in Antarctica?
The 30th one is actually on Everest mountain. So, not.
And it's all downhill.
Oh, I mean, let's hope. I've been told it's kind of up and down, but yes, the 30th marathon will hike up to base camp, and then the marathon starts at base camp. So that one is definitely going to be an epic race. And I also feel like the likelihood of me getting injured is the highest for that marathon. So yeah, going out with a bang with that one. But I'm actually heading next after Atlanta to Yemen. There's a marathon on an island that's actually off of mainland Yemen. So there's no real conflict on this island. It's called Socotra. And so I'll do a marathon there. And then my 29th marathon will be in Greece, because I'm giving a TED Talk in April, so in Paris. And so, I wanted my marathon in April to be a bit more local and not kind of all over the place. So yeah, that's sort of the itinerary for now.
Speaking of TED Talks, there was a TED Talk that you heard that kind of inspired you. It's all about giving back, that kind of thing. Can you tell people about that? Yes,
of course. So when I was originally choosing all of my partner NGOs, I listened to this TED Talk by Peter Singer, and he is sort of... There's a movement called effective altruism, where it's he's started this foundation that does an incredible job at doing the due diligence of sort of weeding through the thousands of nonprofits that currently exist and finding great organizations that you can actually sort of calculate your donation and quantify your donation amount to see exactly what your money would be going towards. And so I loved that approach. And it really sort of gave me some guidance during the selection process of all of my partner NGOs.
Wow. And people want to listen to a TED Talk. What's the name of it?
The name of the TED Talk, I believe, is just, if you search effective altruism Peter Singer, it will definitely come up, because it was sort of him explaining the whole movement and concept behind effective altruism.
Wait, sorry, what's the date of the Everest Marathon?
Yeah, so it's in so I believe we start the trek to base camp mid-May, and the marathon itself is May 29th.
Oh my God, it's going to be a complete zoo there, because that's the prime time season for Everest climbing. My goodness, absolutely. That's when everybody is summiting.
Oh man.
So it's just going to be... a utter zoo
gosh.
in base camp there. So just, I mean,
man.
that's like peak tourist season of
gosh.
all. So it's like you're right there in the center of it. So
okay,
that's going to be a
that's good to know.
field.
That's good to know.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, obviously you're going to be running, but you're going to see just, it's going to be like Manhattan there, I think.
I'm sure it'd be interesting to sort of have this mini city on base camp. But
right. Yeah, you'll see how it is. But anyway, I haven't been there during that period, but I imagine that's how it's going to be. But anyway, as long as they have good porta potties, you'll be fine.
Exactly.
So what after? So then you'll celebrate in June. What's your birthday in June?
June 8th.
Okay, and so then you'll celebrate that where? Atlanta?
Or
Paris?
I probably will fly back to Paris. I'll maybe be in Paris for my actual birthday. And then my husband, actually, he is from Lebanon. And I love going to Lebanon. It's one of my favorite places in the entire world. So we're just gathering a bunch of friends and going to Lebanon, to Beirut, to sort of properly celebrate the birthday.
Awesome. That will be fantastic and well-deserved. And then you won't run for at least a year? At least a marathon, that is.
I'm signed up actually for a 100-kilometer race in October.
Oh, goodness.
So I need a big goal. I think my life would feel very empty without something to really aim for and push myself to accomplish in the future. So that's my next big thing. And then we'll see afterwards what happens.
What do you do when you're not running? In other words, do you have any other kind of freelance job or something like that? Obviously, you don't have a full-time job because it'd be hard to do this, I think, or maybe not. Maybe what is your other side of Liz Warner?
Yeah, my other side of Liz. So at first, when I started the project, I was still doing some freelance work for my previous company. I was doing PR before, and it just got to be so challenging with all the travel and meeting certain deadlines. So I actually just put that aside and kind of really sat down and figured out how I could try to financially, work this whole project without having this side job. So yeah, I mean, as of now, it's only been doing Run to Reach. And I also decided, because when I did have this other freelance gig, I was sort of doing like half-ass work for both. Like I couldn't dedicate myself to one thing. And so I think when this project ends, I'm actually really excited to go back to work. And I definitely want to go into a different professional field, I think. But I am looking forward to a stable income once this all wraps up. But I think for now, it was sort of like if I wanted this project to take off, I really needed to give it my all.
Yeah, again, a common theme that we've been talking about, but it's something that's really to not underestimate. I think a lot of people, when they see people such as yourself that are doing amazing things and running out there and raising money, I just think so many people completely underestimate just how much work it is. And they're probably listening to this like, what do you mean? You're doing this full time? I'm like, yeah, she's doing it. Fuck yeah, doing it full time, because trying to do it otherwise and just trying to squeeze it between your work life, forget it. It's crazy how time consuming these things are. It's crazy enough even if you're not trying to do charity work, but throw in charity. Now, let me ask you, since you did work in PR, what have you learned to being on the other side of the fence? Because you're always working with clients who need publicity. Now, all of a sudden, you've become the client who needs publicity. What did you learn from that process?
I mean, it's really tough. I mean, I wish it's been so hard to get coverage for my project. Just, again, it goes back to, and I'm not even saying my Run to Reach is, the most brilliant thing that's ever come before anyone's attention. But it's, I think there are a lot of people in this world doing really crazy, amazing things. And so I'm competing against them. And so I would say that, I probably send maybe 1,000 emails, cold emails to journalists, and maybe like 1 or 2 respond. So it's been really hard, the PR aspect of it all. But, that's why I've started to really reach out to a lot of podcast hosts, and they're much more receptive, which has been great. And, but I think, going into this project and having quite a lot of PR experience, I felt confident that I could place my story in a lot of publications, and it's just been a lot more difficult than I thought.
Again, what kind of lessons did you learn from that? Like, if you're going to have to do it all over again, obviously, the more ambitious, the more crazy your trek, it's obviously going to be more, but you can't, anyway, that's one thing that helps. But obviously, we all have limits to what we can physically do or mentally do. So what would you do differently in the future if all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got another project? What would your next project be? If you want to do publicity and make your job of doing PR easier, what advice would you give somebody?
I honestly think it comes down to luck and timing. Like, I know, and I'm not saying that, again, what I'm doing deserved more coverage, but a lot of times I would get responses from journalists and they're just not looking for this type of story, or, it really just comes down to luck, I think. And, yes, like, if I was running a marathon in every country in the world, probably I would get more responses. But, I don't want to underestimate what I'm doing, and I don't know what I would do differently, because I honestly just think that it's such a, like, journalists are inundated with emails, pitch emails every day, and sometimes I just don't even think it's because you're not newsworthy enough. And I also think at the end of the day, too, there's so much going on constantly with Trump and everything in the news cycle. And I've actually been confirmed a few times to have, for example, an NBC appearance and an appearance on a local channel in Paris. And all of a sudden, something else comes up that's more newsworthy, or something that Trump says, and like, I'm sort of put to the sidelines. So it really comes down to luck. And, I don't personally know if I could do anything crazier than this. And, physically, again, it's been a pretty big goal, but I think I was hoping that sort of the working with all these charities would actually be what caught people's attention, because I think this is sort of a unique part of this project. I don't think many people are fundraising for as many organizations as I am, but I don't know. I really strongly believe it just comes down to timing and luck, and also having the right connections, because I think journalists, of course, read your emails when they're sent, over by a connection of theirs. So yeah, but
yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
I totally feel for you so much, Liz. I really know exactly what you've been through, because I've been on your side of the fence, and it's just, everybody, it looks easy from the far away, but once you're in the middle of it, you're like, wow, this is tough. This is really hard. So I commend you for sticking with it and pushing through, and despite all the challenges along the way. Speaking about challenges, it's funny because two of my podcasts, two people I've talked to recently have both gone to Yemen. And so here we got your third going to Yemen. So I'm like, what the hell? Is Yemen becoming like the next hot
destination? I know. That's crazy.
It shows that's more a testament to like the crazy people I like to talk to.
Yes.
So I guess.
Yes. Were they going for tourism reasons? Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah. No, they were going for tourism reasons. Both of them, in both cases, they were in Oman, and then they basically did a quick in and out. One of them actually didn't. Actually, one of them wasn't even successful, I think, at getting in there. But the other one was successful. Is Rambling Randy is one of my podcasts. He talks about it, but he just went in for for a day and came back out. So getting your visa for Yemen, Did you just go to the Yemenis embassy in Washington, D.C. and write the application online, or how did you do it?
Yes, so I'm actually going, this marathon it's a company that organizes the whole week. And so they actually helped with the visa process. I just sent in my documents and it is a special visa for Socotra. It's much easier to get rather than visiting mainland Yemen. So yeah, it was, I don't think as difficult as I think, going to mainland.
Now, why is Socotra an autonomous region? Do you know, or is it just happens to be? Okay.
Yeah, it just happens to be. I don't actually know the history behind the island. This is something I need to really read up on, but I think there is a bit of controversy going on now because I think certain countries are trying to annex it from Yemen, and so I think there is some talk about it being, a fully autonomous region. But I know that the people on Socotra consider themselves part of Yemen, and there are a lot of traditions that are on the island that are Yemeni traditions. So I mean, to be honest, I'm going there in a week and a half, and I also kind of really like to be surprised when I go to these countries. Like, I love reading up on them beforehand, but it's always really fascinating to go and sort of be like headfirst in learning about it while there. So yeah, I can report back more soon.
Okay, yeah, it'll be interesting. So Socotra, yeah, I've heard of it, but it's right off like the Somali coast. You could have gone from Somalia land or straight over there. By the way, was your marathon? You're like right next to there.
I know.
Just go one after the other.
I could have just hopped over. Yeah, I did a very circuitous
You could have just
route.
like stuck out your thumb, and a Somali pirate would have picked you up and just taken you there.
I know, just like taxi service. Exactly. But it's actually there's only one flight per week that goes to Socotra, and it's from Cairo, actually. So it's not the easiest place to get to, honestly.
Where else did you go in Africa? Was it Somaliland? And did you do anything in... you did Egypt?
Egypt. I also did a marathon in Sierra Leone, which was amazing. And
tell us about that experience in Sierra Leone. Was that in Freetown?
So it was actually Mekelle, which is a town that's 3-hour drive from Freetown. And it was organized actually by the NGO I was working with there. They do the marathon every year. And it was, my husband actually came with me to that marathon. So it was beautiful to experience the sort of running event with him. And so my husband actually is not a runner at all. And so he was supposed to do the 5-kilometer race there, and maybe a few days before the race I was like, Mark, just do the 10 kilometers, like push yourself. We're here in Sierra Leone, so we switched to the 10 kilometers, and then the day before the actual race I convinced him to switch to the full marathon and do it with me. So I think that marathon will always hold a very special place in my heart, just because.
Is your husband still alive, or did he die of a heart attack there?
He is still alive, I'm happy to report. But he actually, unfortunately, a few months later, he tore his meniscus and his knee, and so we don't know.
You're a tough wife. Listen to you, like I can just imagine the escalation here. Like, honey, I'm going to do a 5K. No, do a 10K. No. Now do a fucking marathon.
I know. No, I felt a little bit bad. But I mean, he had.
So I can see can you cook? Hey, honey, can you cook me an egg? Oh, actually, make me an omelet. Actually, can you make me a full breakfast in bed and bring me champagne too?
Exactly. But
I can see you, Liz. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be pushed in life. I mean, and he pushes me in different ways too. But I mean, to be honest,
so you're originally like, hey, honey, I'm going to raise charity for two. I'm going to raise for 2 organizations, and I'm going to do 5 marathons. And then he said to you, no, you should do 50 or 30.
I know 30 isn't enough. I know. We mostly, I mean, we ran probably 6 to 10 miles and walked the rest because it was also 90-degree weather, 98% humidity there.
It's hot and humid in Sierra Leone all the time.
Yeah, it was really hot. But I mean, a beautiful country. And we actually spent a few days afterwards because there's a beautiful coastline as well in Sierra Leone. So it was just, it was an amazing experience being there. And I really hope to go back, actually.
So did you do it in less than 6 hours?
Yeah, I think we did the full marathon in 7 hours. And we actually, I should also preface, I should say too that, when we are, because it was a marathon that you have fun, and we were with a big group of people who were actually had sort of, not trained properly. And so we were just a big group chatting and telling life stories during this race. And so we all finished last place, which is, and like, I kind of I love that story because actually there's a marathon where I came in first place. So now I can say, I've come in last and first in this mission, which is kind of funny.
Which one was the one you ran in first? Tell us about that one.
Oh my gosh, that was an interesting race. So actually it was in Chile. It was in Patagonia, which was beautiful. So my mom actually came with me to this marathon, and we just misheard the start of or when we were supposed to go to the starting point of the marathon, and it was actually a 45-minute drive away. And so I heard 10:30, but in fact, the marathon started at 9:30. And so I was like speeding to the starting line of the race, and the farthest they could drop me off is at the 6 kilometers point. So I sprinted from the 6 kilometers point to the starting line. People had already started the marathon. And then I essentially ran an extra 6K, and I started way later than everyone else. But because I, again, was so scared that they were going to disqualify me, I was sprinting in that race. And I obviously was very behind most everyone else, but then caught up with everyone and just kept sprinting and came in first in my age group for that marathon, having ran an extra 6 kilometers. So it was a pretty epic race.
Yeah, that's killer. Wow, that's amazing. So again, for people who want to learn more about you, you're on Instagram at runtoreach.com. Oh, well, not .com, but runtoreach.com is your website, and then Instagram.runtoreach. Also, I imagine you have Run to Reach on Facebook as well?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and then you'll have all the links there to how people can donate to the charities, the 20 charities that you're supporting, and as well as if they want to donate directly to you through GoFundMe.
It's all up on there, on my website and my Instagram. And thank you so much to everyone who is choosing to donate. I mean, it means the world to me. And I'm really hoping to push in these last couple months before it all wraps up. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey.
Cool. Well, go run your heart out in Everest and break a leg, and who cares at that point?
Yes, exactly.
I guess you got to break your leg in the last kilometer, because you don't want to break it at the beginning.
That's
because
true.
Then you won't finish that marathon, and you'll be like, and then I won't make it all until I'm 30. So, okay, well, take care of yourself in Everest and enjoy the crowds there.
Thank you.
And that concludes this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we talked about, or if you'd like to comment on the show, or if you'd like to ask me a question, then go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is the username I use on all social media. You can also get to my website by going to ftapon.com. And here's one last reason to remember Tapon. If you like what I do and would like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. And now for 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it somewhere. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.